Morning of my 68th birthday, I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee that had gone cold, staring at a phone that never rang. I want you to understand something before I tell you the rest of this story. I'm not a man who needs a lot. Never have been. I grew up in Dayton, Ohio, in a house where my father worked double shifts at the plant, and my mother stretched a grocery budget like it was made of elastic. We didn't celebrate birthdays with parties. We celebrated them with a phone call, a card on the table, maybe a slice of store-bought cake. That was enough. That was more than enough. So when I say the silence that morning was the loudest thing I'd ever heard in 68 years, I mean it in the truest sense. My son hadn't called. My daughter-in-law hadn't called. No text. No voicemail. Nothing. I kept picking up the phone and setting it back down, the way you do when you're trying to convince yourself you're not waiting, even though you absolutely are. I had transferred money to their account 3 days earlier. $22,000. My son had called then. Picked up on the second ring. I held that thought in my mind for a long time that morning. Longer than I should have. My name is Lawrence. I'm a retired civil engineer from outside of Columbus. Spent 31 years with the same firm, watched highways go up and bridges get built, and I did it well enough that when I retired at 63, I didn't have to worry. My wife Eleanor passed in 2019, pancreatic cancer. 11 weeks from diagnosis to the end. And if you've ever lost someone that fast, you know that the grief doesn't really arrive until months later, when the shock finally lets go of you. After Eleanor died, I leaned into my son. His name is Trent. He was 34 then, married to a woman named Shauna, living in a newer subdivision in Dublin, Ohio, about 40 minutes from my house. They had a daughter, my granddaughter Lily, who was 4 years old and had Eleanor's eyes and her laugh. And I want you to understand that Lily was the reason I kept showing up. The reason I kept calling. The reason I drove 40 minutes on a Sunday, just to sit in their living room and feel like I still had something left of my family. Trent had always been easy with money. I don't say that to be cruel. I say it because it's true, and because I think the truth matters when you're trying to understand how things come apart. Eleanor and I had given him a good life. Private school from 7th grade on, a used car when he turned 17, a better one when he graduated college. We paid for his wedding, a full reception at a venue in Gahana with a live band and 200 guests. When he and Shauna bought their house, I gave them the down payment. $80,000. I told them it was a gift. I meant it as a gift. After Eleanor died, I think I started filling a hole with money. Looking back, I can see that clearly now. It wasn't calculated. It wasn't strategic. It was grief, plain and simple. A man who has spent his whole life providing, suddenly unsure what he's providing for, finds the only language he still knows how to speak. So I spoke it. Generously. Too generously. I paid for Lily's private preschool, then her private kindergarten. I sent money when Trent said the roof needed work. I sent money when Shauna's car needed a transmission. I sent money when they wanted to redo the kitchen, and then again when Trent decided he wanted to start a landscaping business, which lasted about 8 months before he quietly stopped mentioning it. I never asked for it back. I never brought it up. What I asked for, the only thing I ever asked for, was to be present. Sunday dinners. Lily's birthday. A phone call here and there. I wasn't asking for much. I wasn't asking for anything that should have been hard. But somewhere along the way, it became hard. The Sunday dinners got shorter. Then they got rescheduled. Then they just stopped happening without anyone officially canceling them. When I called, Trent would pick up, but he'd sound distracted, like he was doing something else, like my voice was background noise. He was tolerating. Shauna had stopped calling me directly years ago. When I visited, she'd come into whatever room I was in, say something polite, and find a reason to leave within 10 minutes. I noticed. Of course I noticed. I just kept telling myself it was a season. People get busy. Life gets complicated. I told myself that right up until my 68th birthday, when I sat alone at my kitchen table and watched my coffee go cold. Around noon, I sent a text. Just a simple one. Hey, just checking in. Thought maybe we could do dinner this week. Maybe bring Lily by. I want to be honest about what I was hoping for. I was hoping for something small. A quick call. We'll figure something out, Dad. Even a sorry, things have been crazy, but we love you. That would have been enough. That would have been everything. What I got was different. At 3017 in the afternoon, my phone buzzed on the kitchen table. I picked it up thinking it might be a birthday text from my old friend Raymond, or maybe my cousin June, who always remembered. But the name on the screen was Trent. I opened it. The message was long, longer than any text my son had sent me in years. I remember standing in my kitchen reading it, then sitting down, then reading it again because I genuinely could not process it on the first pass. The summary of it was this. He and Shauna needed space. They felt overwhelmed. They felt like the relationship had become stressful and complicated. They appreciated everything I had done, but they needed time to focus on their own family unit. They asked me not to call, not to drop by, not to reach out at all for the foreseeable future. Shauna had liked the message. I could see it at the bottom, a little heart. I sat there for a long time. I've tried to explain to people what that moment felt like, and I haven't found the right words yet. It wasn't just sadness. It was something more disorienting than sadness. It was the feeling of looking at something familiar and suddenly not recognizing it, like walking into a room you've been in 1,000 times and finding all the furniture moved, everything technically still there, nothing in the right place. My son had texted me on my birthday, which he apparently did not remember was my birthday, to tell me to disappear. I set the phone down, screen up, and looked at the ceiling for a while. Here is what I want to say about what happened next, and I want to say it carefully. I did not react in anger. I know that might be hard to believe, but I didn't. What I felt, once the initial shock passed, was something quieter than anger. It was clarity, the kind of clarity that comes when you stop hoping something isn't true and finally accept that it is. I'd spent 5 years since Eleanor died pouring myself into a relationship that had been quietly transactional for a long time. Not on my end, on theirs. And the text I just received wasn't a boundary. It wasn't a request for space so they could grow or heal or figure something out. It was a dismissal, clean and tidy. Delivered on a birthday they'd forgotten, 3 days after I'd wired them $22,000. That night, I called my attorney. His name is a man I've worked with for nearly 15 years, and I told him I needed to come in at his earliest convenience. He asked if everything was all right. I told him it would be. 2 days later, I sat across from him in his office on the east side of Columbus, and I told him what had happened. All of it. Not just the text, but the pattern. The years of it. He listened the way good attorneys listen, without interruption, and when I finished, he folded his hands on his desk and asked me what I wanted to do. I'd thought about that question for 2 days. I had a clear answer. My estate, at that point, included my house, which I owned outright, an investment portfolio worth approximately $1.4 million, a life insurance policy, several retirement accounts, and a family trust that Eleanor and I had set up in 2011. The trust had been structured conservatively with Trent as the primary beneficiary upon my death, and Lily as secondary. I was the sole trustee. Every dollar, every asset, every disbursement, it all ran through me. I had never particularly thought about that before. I had set the trust up the way you set up a trust when you assume your family will remain your family. It had never occurred to me to think about it as leverage. It had never needed to be. But sitting in that office, I thought about the penthouse, the text, the liked heart, the $22,000 sitting in their account, and I understood something clearly. The relationship my son thought he had ended was only the inconvenient part of having me in his life, the financial infrastructure he and his wife had quietly built their lifestyle around. That part, he assumed, was permanent. He assumed it would run on regardless. He had told me not to reach out. He had not told me not to think. I told my attorney to draw up the paperwork. Full amendment to the trust. Trent removed as primary beneficiary. A separate, irrevocable education trust established for Lily, funded and sealed. Because whatever was happening between adults, Lily was a child, and none of this was her fault. The remaining estate, upon my death, to be divided between two charities Eleanor had loved, the American Cancer Society and a small local food bank in Dayton that had helped my grandmother's family when she was young. He asked if I wanted to sleep on it. I told him I'd had 2 nights of sleep on it. I was ready. He drew up the paperwork. I signed it on a Thursday afternoon with his paralegal as witness. On Friday morning, I made a second call. This one to the financial advisor who managed my investment accounts, a careful and thorough woman I had worked with for 11 years. I told her I would be restructuring the account beneficiaries. We spent about 90 minutes on the phone going through everything. I was calm the entire time. I had my notes in front of me. She asked once if I was sure. I told her I was. That weekend, I drove to Dayton. I hadn't been back in a while, and the city was the same as it always is. Quieter than it used to be, but still mine in some way I can't fully explain. I visited my parents' graves. I sat there for probably 20 minutes in the November cold, just talking. I told my father what I'd done. I think he would have understood. He was a practical man. I want to be clear that during all of this I did not respond to my son's text. I did not call. I did not show up at his door. He had asked for space. I gave him space. About 11 days after his text, I received a voicemail. I didn't recognize the tone at first, my son's voice, but higher and tighter than I was used to, with an edge I couldn't immediately name. He said he'd been trying to reach his financial advisor, said there seemed to be some kind of error with his account, asked me to call him back when I had a chance. I listened to it twice, then I set the phone down. 3 days after that, the calls started in earnest. First from Trent, then from Shauna, then from Trent again. 7 calls the first day, 11 the next. I counted them, because I needed to understand what I was looking at. I needed to see clearly what his version of no contact actually meant. They had wanted space from me. They had wanted me to stop reaching out. The moment the money shifted, they wanted me on the phone within the hour. I did not answer. Eventually, I think it was the 3rd or 4th day of calls, a letter arrived. Paper, in an envelope, handwritten by Shauna. I know her handwriting. She has neat, rounded letters, the kind that look like she was taught penmanship. The letter was 3 pages long. It explained that there had been a misunderstanding, that the text had been poorly worded, that they had never meant to be hurtful, that they loved me, that family was everything to them, that they hoped we could talk. I read it at my kitchen table with fresh coffee this time. I want to tell you what I felt, and I want to be precise about it. I felt sad, not angry, not vindicated in some triumphant way. Just deeply, quietly sad, because the letter wasn't wrong, exactly. I do believe Trent loves me in whatever way he's capable of right now. I believe Shauna wrote those 3 pages and meant them in the moment she wrote them. I believe a lot of things about the two of them that are generous and probably accurate. But I also believe in patterns. I believe in what people do when they think there are no consequences. I believe in the particular shape of a relationship that only bends toward you when it needs something. I haven't written back yet. I see Lily every other Saturday. I arrange that separately through Trent's mother, Eleanor's sister Ruth, who lives about 20 minutes from their house and who has her own opinions about all of this, which she has shared with me at length over the phone. Trent agreed to it without much argument. I think he understands on some level that there are certain things he doesn't get to control anymore. Lily doesn't know any of this, of course. She's 7 now. She has Eleanor's eyes, and she still does that thing where she laughs with her whole body, and when I pick her up, she wraps her arms around my neck like she's making sure I stay. I take her to the Science Museum in Columbus when the weather's cold. In the summer, we go to the Cozy, or we walk around Goodale Park and feed the ducks. She tells me about her friends, about her teacher, about a show she's watching that I pretend to know about. I listen to every word. The education trust is set, funded for private school through 12th grade if she wants it, and college after that. She won't need to ask anyone's permission to access it. She won't need to perform or produce or be anybody's bargaining chip. It will simply be there when she needs it, the way good things should be. As for my house, I had a long conversation with my realtor a few weeks ago. I've been thinking about selling. Not because I need to, but because I've been in this house for 26 years, and Eleanor's ghost is everywhere in it. Which I mean is both a comfort and a difficulty. It is a retirement community outside of Sarasota that Raymond has been talking about for 2 years. I've looked at it online more times than I'd care to admit. Warm winters. A golf course I'd probably use 3 times and then complain about. People my age who have their own stories and aren't waiting for a phone that doesn't ring. I haven't decided. But I'm thinking about it. That's new. For a long time after Eleanor died, I couldn't imagine wanting anything. Now I can imagine a few things. That feels like progress. Trent called again last Tuesday. I was in the garage going through boxes I'd been meaning to sort for years, and I saw his name on the screen and I stood there holding the phone in my dusty work gloves, just watching it ring. I didn't feel the old pull to answer it. I didn't feel the anxiety I used to feel when I thought about him being unhappy with me. I felt something steadier, something that didn't have a simple name. I let it go to voicemail. He didn't leave one. My financial advisor sent me the updated account summaries last week. Everything is in order. The trust amendment is filed. The beneficiary designations are updated. The education trust for Lily is funded and sealed. My attorney has a copy of everything. My friend Raymond has a copy of everything. My friend Raymond has a copy. My cousin June has a copy. I am not a man who leaves things to chance. People ask me sometimes, well, the few people I've told, they ask me if I regret it, if I think I went too far, if I worry that I've burned something down that could have been repaired. I think about that question honestly. I do. What I've come to is this. I didn't burn anything down. The fire had been going for years. I just finally stopped pouring water on it. My son is a grown man. He's 38 years old. He has a daughter and a mortgage, and a life he built largely on a foundation I laid, and none of that was a mistake. I don't regret any of it. I was a father. I provided. That's what fathers do. But at 68 years old, having buried a wife and worked 31 years and raised a child and honestly tried to keep something alive that turned out to require my silence and my money, but not my presence. At 68, I think I've earned the right to say, enough. Not in bitterness, in truth. The phone is quiet most mornings now, but it's a different kind of quiet, not the silence of waiting, just the silence of a house where a man lives alone and is, slowly learning to be fine with that. There's a cardinal that comes to my back porch most mornings around 7. Eleanor used to say that cardinals were visits from people you'd lost. I'm not sure I believe that. But I refilled a feeder anyway, and when he lands and looks at me through the glass with that particular sideways bird attention, I say good morning, out loud. The way you do when you live alone and talking to a bird feels like enough. Some mornings, it is. There's a version of the story where I'm the villain. I know that. Some people will hear what I did, the attorney, the trust amendment, the beneficiary changes, and they'll say I was cold, calculated. That a real father wouldn't have done it. I've sat with that judgment. I don't dismiss it. But here's what I keep coming back to. The choices Trent made didn't happen overnight. They accumulated quietly over years. And the truth is, I helped build the conditions for them. Every time I sent money without a conversation attached to it, I was teaching him something. I was teaching him that love arrives in a wire transfer, that presence is optional, that the relationship could coast on a financial current I kept generating. That was my failure as much as his. I own that. What I also know is this. At some point, a man has to decide what he actually believes about how people treat each other. Not what he hopes. Not what he tells himself at night to get to sleep. What he actually believes down in the place where the real accounting happens. I believe that how you treat someone when there's nothing in it for you is the only true measure of your character. Trent didn't call on my birthday because there was nothing to gain from calling. He called 47 times the week he realized the money was gone. That contrast is not subtle. That contrast is the whole story. I don't say this with bitterness. I say it the way you state a fact you wish weren't true. What I tried to do, and I'm not sure I always succeeded, was respond to that reality with my eyes open rather than my feelings closed. The anger would have been easier, honestly. Anger has momentum. Anger tells you what to do next. What I felt instead was something slower and more demanding. It asked me to be honest about my own role. It asked me to make decisions I could live with at 80, not just feel righteous about at 68. It asked me to think about Lily, who is 7 years old and has no vote in any of this, and make sure that whatever I did, I didn't let my pain become her disadvantage. That took more out of me than the anger would have. I think about the men I've known who raised children well. My own father, who worked double shifts and never once made us feel like a burden. A colleague I had for many years who put 3 kids through college on a modest salary, and never mentioned it as a sacrifice. What those men had in common wasn't money. It wasn't even patience, exactly. It was a kind of moral backbone, a willingness to hold a line even when holding it was lonely. To say no when no was the honest answer. To stay present without being a pushover. To love their children enough to let consequences be real. I think I understood that principle for most of Trent's childhood. Somewhere along the way, after Eleanor died, I lost the thread of it. Grief will do that. It makes you want to buy back what you've lost. The intelligence I wish I'd had sooner is simpler than it sounds. Money given without expectation still creates expectation. Provision without boundaries still teaches dependency. You can love someone generously and still do them harm if the generosity never asks anything of them in return. Trent is 38 years old. He still has time to understand that. I hope he does. Not for my sake anymore. For Lily's. She's going to be watching how he handles things, the same way he was always watching me.